It's another beautiful day, so let's go on a PodWalk together about one of the reasons that finishing music can be so difficult. So when I'm coaching musicians and composers and songwriters and producers, at the start of almost every conversation, I ask them what they want, what they've tried already to get what they want, and crucially, how they're viewing both what they want and what they think they're doing to get there. So their perspective, their perception of what they're doing. Because it's incredibly important for me to get a sense of how they are viewing the world, what their model of reality is. Because all of us aren't actually seeing really real reality. We are experiencing a representation of reality created by our minds. And obviously, for various different reasons, our representations of reality are distorted. It's not like we're looking through two eye holes at reality. And one of the things that constantly surprises me is that because of this feature of our experience of what's actually going on, it's amazing how much shifting your perspective on reality, and this doesn't mean making things up, it means actually getting closer to what is really real, can unlock insight, can mean that you do things that you didn't previously think that you could. Because an enormous amount of what you don't think you can do is because of certain beliefs that you hold, certain assumptions that you have, certain perspectives that you have about reality, which you're unaware of and which are stopping you from doing the things that you need to do to succeed. And if you'd like a more in-depth explanation of what exactly coaching is and how it's different from teaching, because when I'm coaching one-to-one clients and my mastermind groups, I'm not doing very much teaching at all. I'm actually helping them with their own goals. And coaching is as different from teaching as teaching is from consulting, for instance. But when I'm coaching my clients and masterminders, there's a rule of thumb I tend to use, which is that the closer we can get to aligning our behaviors and our perspective with objective reality, the more success we're likely to have. If I am taking actions based upon a highly distorted view of what is actually going on, then that is likely to not work as well as something which is in line with what is going on. The further our perspective and behaviors are from objective reality, the more mysterious, mystifying, and mistaken our process is going to be. For example, much of what we assume or we intuitively do to make music flies in the face of how our minds actually work. You will have heard me talking very often that our opinion, our judgments are always changing about the music which we make, and in fact about other music as well. You know, that thing where sometimes you listen to a piece of music that you really like, you're like, actually I don't feel like this. If that piece of music was something you were working on, you might, instead of just going, oh, I don't feel like this, you might go, actually, there's something wrong with this, when there might not be. It's just one example. If you've ever had the experience of working on the same piece of music where very little has changed, and one day you absolutely love it, and the next day you really don't like it at all, you will have experienced this opinion changing thing. But what do you do in that situation where you find that you don't like something that you previously loved? You try and change it, even though yesterday you really loved it. Or similarly, maybe yesterday you didn't like it and today you do like it, so you don't change it. We tend to believe our opinion in the moment and forget that our opinion is likely to change. And that's just one example of how the way that most people make music is out of whack with the reality of the situation. Because as soon as you start to take into account that your opinion changes, that your judgments change, even when the music doesn't, that involves taking a different approach to making music. This explains why people can make so much music when they start using the music machine system, because over time, through all of this coaching that I've been doing and running these many experiments, I've developed a system which takes into account, as far as I can, objective reality, which takes into account the way things are, not the way that we would like them to be in some fantasy world. And this same problem exists outside of making music as well. If you, for instance, haven't been releasing a piece of music that is finished, or that you've been procrastinating on doing something about building your audience or something like that, there are going to be a bunch of assumptions and beliefs that you're probably unaware of that you're making that are stopping you from doing that, because you believe certain things, you're assuming certain things which might not be true. I mean, we all have a model of objective reality that we are using that is inaccurate. This is why I'm constantly developing my systems and processes. The music machine's always developing, because we can never reach a 100% accurate view of objective reality. We can only ever approach it. And this leads me onto the third belief that I've been talking about over the last few episodes. The other episodes are in the show notes. The third belief that I've been talking about, which has led me to feel an enormous amount of motivation and excitement to do something which probably to the outside world seems somewhat ridiculous or impossible, which is making a successful career as a singer-songwriter starting at the age of 50 without touring. And the third belief is that you are not attempting to reach a fixed point. In fact, there is no fixed point that we can reach as human beings. Now, the difficulty with this belief is that in finishing a piece of music, which is obviously what we have to do if we want to be artists, in finishing a piece of music, we are creating something that is fixed, but which we won't ever perceive as fixed. And what I've noticed in an enormous number of musicians, maybe even the majority, is that because we are creating something that's fixed, in other words, a product, a recording, we believe we also need to perceive that music in the same way all the time. And if your perception of it changes, then there's a problem with the music. You will notice that if you're struggling to finish a piece of music, if you are waiting for some kind of signal of certainty that a piece of music is finished, then you are looking for a fixed point which doesn't actually exist, because your perception of the music is always going to be changing. Even after you've put it up on Apple Music and Spotify and you listen to it in the future, every time you listen to that, your perception of it will be somewhat different, either slightly different or very different. And that will go on for the rest of your life. There was a very famous, legendary producer who I was talking to, and he said, "I just want to make a piece of music that I will never cringe at." That is not possible. There was another musician I spoke to, and this is what he said, and I find it hard to believe, but this is what he said. "I literally listen to what I'm working on 10,000 times or more." And I said, "Why do you do that?" And he said, "Because I want to make sure that I'm never going to get bored of it." So those two situations, I want to make a piece of music that I will never cringe at, and I want to make sure that I make a piece of music that I will never get bored of. Both of those are impossible goals to hit, because how will you know? How can you be sure you will never cringe at it? How can you be sure you will never get bored of it? The only way that you can do that is listening to it constantly over and over again until the moment at which you die. And even if you could do that, even if that was a good idea, your opinion of that music is going to change. It's simply because you are changing. You know, in the best case, let's say you are growing as a musician, as an artist. That means that anything that you finish today, your perception of it is going to shift over time, and you're going to think, actually, I can do much better than that now. I'm not into that now. That was an example of a past me where I didn't know this and I didn't know that and I didn't know the other. So in other words, if you are doing the thing that you really want to be doing, which is growing as a musician and artist, then the music that you have made in the past is never going to be something that is your best work. If you are growing, your best work is always in your future. Therefore, your worst work is in your past. Whether it's successful or not is a different matter. What we're talking about is what you think of your music. The music that we are finishing is fixed, but our experience of it is changing. So there seems to be a contradiction there. We have to finish something that is fixed, but which we know is not going to be fixed in terms of our perception of it. So how do we move forward in this situation? When you think about it, what is music other than our perception of it? I mean, do you experience music outside of your experience of music? No, you don't. Even though there is an objective thing that is fixed, your experience of it is constantly changing. So in other words, what music isn't fixed as far as you experience it. So in other words, there is no fixed point because your experience of your music is always going to be changing. So what we are not attempting to do in finishing a piece of music is thinking that we are approaching a fixed point. Another example of this mistake is related to the last belief I spoke about, link in the show notes, on the last episode, which is I could solve any problem. One of the things that I've noticed when I'm helping people solve the problems in their music and also out there in the world is that they believe what they're trying to do is solve every problem. Because that state of having solved every problem is a state of perfection where we have reached a fixed point. And you might be thinking now, but hang on a minute, Mike, you just said in that last episode that we could solve every problem. I didn't say we could solve every problem. I said you could solve any problem, because one of the most important things to understand about solving problems is that whenever you solve one problem, you create another. In solving one problem, you are never getting to a state of perfection, a fixed state of perfection. You are simply creating different problems for yourself. And progress is about solving better problems, solving preferable problems. So in other words, when you're finishing music, what you're not attempting to do is to get to a point where you can't think of anything else to do. Now, that's another example of fixed point thinking. If you're attempting to get to a place where you can't think of anything else to do, there's only two options. Number one, you're deluding yourself. There is nothing else to do. This is perfect, right? Or number two, you're not listening hard enough, because finishing music is about deciding to stop solving the problems. That is always the case. That, I think, is the meaning of the well-known aphorism, art is never finished, only abandoned. I might take issue with the word abandoned. You're throwing your hands up in despair because you have an expectation that you can finish it. In fact, that statement, art is never finished, abandoned, may well be another example of fixed point thinking, because you think that finishing art is about reaching a fixed point where all of the problems have been solved. That is never the case. So when we're finishing music, yes, we are creating something that is fixed. And because our experience of that music, that fixed music, is always changing, effectively, we aren't attempting to reach a fixed point. We're not attempting to make something that's perfect. We simply have to view every fixed result that we create as being another step on our journey of progress, another opportunity to improve, another diary entry on the way to us getting better. Because remember, if you are going in the direction you want to go, which is in the direction of progress and improvement, then whatever you are finishing today isn't going to be as good as what you could finish in the future. This doesn't mean that you are no longer going to be proud of it, because in understanding that there is no fixed point, in understanding the other two beliefs, that you could solve any problem and that you can experience lifelong growth. Each piece of music that you finish, each album that you finished, is simply another milestone, another chapter in your story of becoming the artist you aspire to be. So that's it for today, and I've now covered the 3 beliefs. If you haven't listened to the last 2 episodes, have a listen to them. I'll put a link to them in the show notes as well. And if there's somebody else you know who is struggling to finish music, then please feel free to share these episodes with them. You'd be doing a great favor to me and to them too. So with all that said, onwards and upwards.